welcome back once again to the Imaginary Gallery. This is TJ, your host. I've come to a different section of the Lundy Bancroft book. Why does he do that inside the minds of angry and controlling men, involving an abusive man and a target woman? He calls it the abusive man in everyday life, which can apply to a female as well. Begins with some quotes.
Feels like I'm going crazy. Sometimes I can just tell it's going to be one of those days. No matter what I do, I'm going to get it sooner or later.
He's just a teddy bear underneath.
I never know what to expect. He can just turn on me any moment out of the blue.
I wouldn't call him an abuser. I mean, he can be really nice for weeks at a time.
I really love him.
Bancroft tells us that over the 15-plus years he's worked with abusive men, he's spent hundreds of hours on the phone listening to the partners of these clients as they describe their lives. His job is to see the client through the woman's eyes, using his imagination to enter her home and absorb the atmosphere that he creates day in and day out. By assuming her perspective, he begins to see beneath the client's exterior. At the same time, he doesn't exactly see the same man that she does. The circumstances in which he sees them, though, have some different aspects than she would have. Number one, it's safe for him to challenge this person and confront it because he's sitting in a room full of witnesses, including co-workers and a co-leader, in many cases. He's also got an advantage over this person because this person's usually on probation. And so a negative report from Bancroft could get this person into trouble before a judge. Also, Bancroft has names and descriptions for the tactics that the abusive people use. The man then finds it difficult to confuse or intimidate Bancroft or to make him feel terrible about himself because Bancroft will continue to point out, oh, that was a projection. Oh, well, that was whatever, and there are labels for things. He says that the abuse loses some of its power when you have names to label the various weapons that are being used. Also, Bancroft doesn't have to live with this man, so he has few opportunities to retaliate against him for standing up to him. And then the last one is that some of these people in the group who are attempting to apply the concepts of the program might challenge the man on his attitudes and his behaviors. These challenges from other abusers can make it more difficult for this particular one to blame everything on the partner or on all ladies or men in general. Bancroft says he also learns a lot about these men by seeing his reactions to discussions in the group. A common one is that he will express disapproval to other abusers in the room when they tell like a story of something they did that was abusive, because anything he considers that he wouldn't do would be real abuse, and he considers whatever he does to be not abuse. And while tending to express sympathy and support for fellow abusers who employ the same tactics he does, he might turn to Bancroft and say, well, what do you expect the poor guy to do in those circumstances? The abused lady and Lundy Bancroft try to form a team so they can share their observations about this man and help each other to recognize patterns or dynamics. Bancroft is eager to learn from her about the client, at the same time eager to share with her any observations that might help her to protect herself or unravel what he's doing in her own mind. One of the earliest lessons he learned from an abused lady is that to understand abuse, you can't look at just the explosions. You have to examine with equal care the spaces between the explosions. The dynamics of these periods tell us much about the abuse as the rages or the thrown objects, or as the disgusting name-calling or jealous accusations. The abusive person's thinking and behavior during the calmer periods are what cause his big eruptions that wound or frighten. In this chapter, we will enter the mind of the abuser at various points in daily life to better understand what exactly sparks these abusive reactions. First is the abusive man in arguments. He begins by examining in detail an argument between an abusive man and the partner, the kind that he hears about routinely from clients and their partners. Jesse and B are walking along their town. Jesse is sullen and clearly annoyed. So B says,
What's happening with you? I don't understand what you're so upset about.
Jesse says,
I'm not upset. I just don't feel like talking right now. Why do you always have to read something into it? Can't I just be quiet? Not everybody wants to talk all the time, just because you do.
B says,
I don't talk all the time. What do you mean by that? I just want to know what's wrong.
Jesse says,
I just finished telling you nothing is bothering me. Give me a break. You talk all the time and you know it. When we're having dinner with my brother and his wife, I can't believe you went on and on about your retarded journalism class. You're 40 years old, for goodness sake. The world isn't excited about your fantasies of being famous. Now grow up.
and B says,
Fantasies about being famous? I'm trying to get a job, Jesse, because the travel agency jobs have all moved downtown. And I wasn't going on and on about it. They were interested. They were asking me a lot of questions. That's why we stayed on the subject for a while.
Jesse says,
Oh yeah? They were real interested. They were being polite to you because you're so full of yourself. You're so naive you don't even know it.
B says,
I don't believe this. The dinner was almost 2 weeks ago. Have you been brewing about it all this time?
Jesse says,
I don't brew, B. You're the one who brews. You love to get us confused. I'll see you later. I'm not in the mood for this.
B says,
In the mood for what? I haven't done anything. You've had it in for me since I arrived to meet you.
Jesse says, you're
Yelling at me, B. You know I hate being yelled at. You need help. Your emotions just fly off the handle. Goodbye.
and he leaves.
Where are you going?
I'll walk home, thanks. You take the car. I'd rather be left alone.
And so B says,
Is this going to take you more than a half hour to walk home? It's freezing.
Jesse says,
Oh, now suddenly you care about me so much? Up yours! Later!
and he's gone. The lives of abused ladies are full of these kinds of exchanges. Jesse didn't call her any bad names. He wasn't degrading to her. He didn't yell. He didn't hit her or threaten her. B will be in a tough spot when she has to explain this to a friend about how upset she is because Jesse's behavior is hard to describe. What can she say? That he's sadistic? That he's sarcastic? That he holds on to things? That he's overly critical? A friend may respond,
Well, that sounds hard, but I wouldn't call that abuse.
yet as Jesse walks away, B feels like she's just been slapped in the face. Questions what's going on in this argument. First, we'll look at what Jesse's doing, and then we'll examine what he's thinking and how it works. The first point to illuminate is the abusive person's problem is not that it responds inappropriately to conflict. This person's abusiveness is operating prior to the conflict. It usually creates the conflict, and it determines the shape that the conflict will take. Bancroft tells us therapists frequently will try to work with an abusive person by analyzing his or her responses to disagreements and trying to get him or her to handle these conflicts in a different manner. But Bancroft tells us that such an approach is missing the point. The abusive person's abusiveness was what caused the tension to begin with. Jesse utilized an array of conversational control tactics, as most abusive people do. Number one tactic, he denies that he's angry, even though obviously he is. And instead of dealing with what's really bothering him, he channels that energy into criticizing poor little old B about something else. 2. He belittles, he insults, and patronizes B in several different ways, including claiming she likes to talk all the time and has fantasies about being famous, stating that she should grow up, and telling her that she's accusing him of stewing over things when it's actually her. 3. He tells B that she is unaware that other people are looking down upon her, that others don't take her seriously, and he even has the audacity to call her naive. 4. He criticizes her for raising her voice, in response, of course, to his long list of insults. Number 5. He tells her that she's the one who is mistreating him. Heard that one a few times. 6. He stomps off like a baby and plays a victim by putting himself in the position of having to take a 30-minute long walk in the freezing cold back to the home. How many of you have had discussions like the one we just covered? I have, and it's like you can't say anything to make it better. But we're analyzing that now. B, at this point, has been left in a miserable state. She feels like some kind of scratching post that a cat or a wolf has just ripped and sharpened its claws on. One of the reasons why she's so shaken up by this experience, though, is that she never seems to know when one of these verbal attacks is going to occur or what makes it happen. On a different day, she might have met Jesse to take him home and had a wonderful, pleasant conversation with him about his workday. So she's just left imagining that something horrible must have happened at work today with him, and he's just taking it out on her, which it could be true, but actually it has little to do with what's really happening. So what is happening? The story we hear began 3 weeks earlier when Jesse and B were having a nice dinner with Jesse's relatives. What we've just learned from their argument is that Jesse doesn't seem to like B to be the center of attention for any particular length of time. Why would this be? Why wouldn't he want her to be? Well, there are a few reasons. Reason number one, he considers it her job to be the supporting role to him. This is the same type of attitude that some people use or say, such as, behind every great man stands a woman. If either of them is going to be the center of attention, he believes that it should be him. If he is feeling like being quiet, then she should be quiet too. She should be in his shadow, is what he believes. 2, he's constantly focused on her faults, so he assumes that everyone else must be as well. 3, he doesn't like her to appear in public as being a smart, capable, or interesting person because that will collide with his deeply held beliefs that she's irrational, worthy of being ignored, and incompetent. That's a view of B that he might want others to share with him about her. 4, he's scared on some level that if she gets enough support for the strengths that she apparently has, she may leave and leave him all alone. Bancroft says he's quite likely correct. Notice how number 2 and number 3 are almost opposite. To recap, 2 was constantly focused on her faults and thinks everybody else is. 3 is doesn't like her to appear in public as if she's got her act together, because that'll collide with his belief that she's not and doesn't, and she's a lady and belongs in the kitchen. He assumes that she comes off terribly to others, which embarrasses him, but he's also worried that she may come off looking pretty good, because then other people might see her as being a capable person. He reacts strongly to both of these. Remember we discussed how they have conflicting beliefs all at the same time? We also see the signs that Jesse finds B's journalism class a threat to his control over her. In fact, that's probably what he has been dwelling on for the past several weeks, causing his yucky mood. Abusive people are uncomfortable when they see signs of budding independence in their partners and often look for ways to undermine the partner's progress in the future days. Now we return to the day of that argument. We can see Jesse launches into attributing many of his own characteristics onto B, which would be what? Projection. Claiming that she's the one who's full of herself, that she dwells in grievances, that she screams, that she doesn't have any care in the world about him. This behavior is, as I just stated, projection. It's a psychological process through which people will attribute their own fears or flaws onto those around them. Previously, we discussed a process where an abusive person turns the reality on its head. That's not quite the same thing as projection. Jesse perceives B to be yelling because one of his core values is that she is not supposed to ever get angry at him, no matter what he does. He thinks that she doesn't care about him because, in his brain, there's no way she can care about him unless she cares only about him and not all about herself or any other people. He thinks she's full of herself because she sometimes does get excited about her own personal goals or her own activities, when he thinks that she should be excited about what he is doing. He thinks that she dwells on grievances because she sometimes attempts to make him be accountable, rather than just letting him sticker with cleaning up the messes, literally and figuratively. Jesse is also using the projection as a tactic of control. Part of why Jesse accuses B of doing all these selfish and abusive things that he does is to make it hard for her to get anywhere with any grievances that she has. Bancroft states that he's had several clients say, "Oh, I knew what I was saying about her wasn't true, but it really gets her. It really presses her buttons." And he says it's surprising how common it is for abusers to admit, if they're caught off guard, to deliberate use of controlling and abusive behaviors. For all these reasons, saying simply that he's projecting doesn't adequately capture the reasons for an abusive person's distorted accusations. The final behavior we need to examine in Jesse's decision to take a long, freezing cold walk home by himself is, why does he make himself into a victim? Number one, he's drawn to making B feel sorry for him so that he, once again, can have his feelings and himself be the center of attention, crowding hers out. She will feel as though she shouldn't pursue her own complaints about the things that he's just assaulted her with verbally because he is suffering so much. Two, he wants other people to feel sorry for him. He can describe to a friend or a relative how the argument led to a miserable walk for him, and they'll think, "Oh, you poor thing," and he'll probably adjust the story, of course, as these cluster B monsters always do, to their own advantage. Abusive people usually spruce up the account, perhaps say that she was furious and she drove off and left him there alone. And he was left to walk all by himself 30 minutes home. He doesn't consciously plan these maneuvers ahead of time, but experience has taught him on a deeper level that playing the victim will always increase the levels of sympathy that he receives. 3, he may desire for her to worry about what others might think. She won't want to come out looking like the mean person, so she'll take steps to smooth over the fight. And number 4, on some level, he does enjoy walking by himself alone for 30 minutes, wallowing in his own self-pity because it helps him feel more justified about this recurring pattern of evil and undermining towards B. It's a way of reassuring himself that she's the evil one, not him. Now, abusive persons are human beings, and somewhere buried deep inside this creature, under thick layers of entitlement and disrespect, there is a heart that knows what he's doing is wrong. This heart periodically tries to send a few beats up through the layers, so the abusive person has to learn to stomp them and crush them back down. Now, each verbal battle with an abusive person is a walk through a minefield, and each field is different. Jesse seems to be a mixture of the water torturer and the victim, with a little sprinkling of Mr. Right, which we discussed previously. Perhaps an argument on the same subject with the drill sergeant or the player would go quite differently. But regardless of specific styles of abusers, very little of what an abusive person does in an argument is as irrational or emotional as it seems.
I am the Narcopath, and I miss you. I know you miss me too.
Oh, give me a break. I know it was our first year anniversary, and we were supposed to meet in the hotel that we met when we first met. We were gonna relive the experience. Problem was, I wasn't there when you got there, and I made up a story. I will tell you now. When I got to the hotel to meet you, somebody else caught my attention. Or should I say, I caught somebody else's attention, and I couldn't pass it up. So I told the person I was there alone, and we went up to his room. Clothes came off, teats were exposed, and I lost track of time. So I made up a story the next day, which I could tell you didn't believe. But I used my straight face and my voice to say, I can't believe you don't believe me. How could you think? You think I'm lying? I think that means you're lying. Oh! And that got you to shut up at least for a few days. But now that we're through, I figured I might as well tell you. That's what was up, honey.